Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of RealmCast for Minor Realm Games. My name is Bill, and I'd like to first and foremost thank everybody for your follows, subscriptions, and of course your listenership. Thank you so much for the support over at the Minor Realm Games Twitch and in backing our first Kickstarter for our very first D&D module, Clock Strike Zero, which is live right now. So thanks everybody. Today, we welcome a very special guest to the show, fast friends, a gaming author, founder of Casl Entertainment, old school system enthusiast, an all-around delightful member of the community, Mr. Carlos Lising. Hello, hey. Carlos. How are you?
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. And before we even get started, I want to congratulate you guys on the success of your Kickstarter so far, man. I'm really excited to see how that goes.
You're too kind. I am terrified. It's our first, right? So, we have this baby and now we have to deliver it, sort of thing. So, but thank you so much for your support. It's been tremendously helpful and dearly appreciated. I know of you, and I know a lot of our listeners might, but to those that are sort of just coming around, either to the show or more broadly speaking, the hobby, why don't we start out just by telling our listeners a little bit more about you, Carlos. So, you grew up in Chicago, incredibly close in proximity to the birthplace of Dungeons and Dragons. It's the late 1970s. You stumble upon this game. Take us through sort of how you came up into this whole crazy universe.
Yeah, sure. It was kind of a strange thing for me. I moved back and forth a few times from Chicago and Ohio, but I remember that the very first time I saw a Dungeons & Dragons product, I was a huge comic book enthusiast. And I'd seen some stuff in some advertisements, and it was kind of intriguing to me. But I really didn't give it too much thought until one day my best friend at the time, whose name was John, he'd gotten the Holmes Basic for Christmas. And it was sitting on his table downstairs where we played games. We used to play video games and stuff down there because we had a console. And I kept staring at him like, why don't we give this thing a try? And he was like, nah, I'm not really all that interested in it. Well, finally I convinced him to try, and I played a first level magic user. And I guess I didn't understand the fact that I wasn't Gandalf. I got waxed in like the second room after I'd cast Magic Missile, and I didn't understand that I could only cast it like once a day. My 10 minutes of game time that day got me hooked though, and I was really I wanted to play over and over and over again, and I found out very quickly that the easiest way to get into games was to be the dungeon master. So it seems like it's easy to find a game when you're DMing, much more difficult when you're a player. And so I started DMing, and it kind of went from there. I was just hungry for material, for game material of all kinds, and I quickly moved past the Holmes. I mean, the game was really in transition at that point in time, because you got to remember this is the late 70s, and I remember picking up the advanced books, and once I started getting the advanced books, man, I was hooked. That was the beginning of the love affair for me. Yeah,
I mean, it just kind of gives me chills even hearing about it. I mean, we all remember sort of our first time, but you were sort of right there, kind of in the nexus and the genesis of what would, I don't think anybody understood it, right? I mean,
no, and I think, first of all, when I was a kid, growing up in Chicago, I think I had this opinion that every single thing that happened in the world happened in Chicago, because you would hear a lot of, I remember listening to songs and they were all based in Chicago, or I would see TV shows and they were based in Chicago, or just different kinds of media. And yet I didn't really realize that what was happening. I was at the epicenter of really what was happening as far as that went, just up the road. I remember, as a matter of fact, though, one of the things I'm really happy about my background, being a Chicagoan, when I finally got a chance to correspond with Gary Gygax via email and such, when I realized that he was reachable that way, one of our first, we didn't really talk about game stuff so much as we talked about the Chicago Bears quite a bit, because he's such a huge Bears fan and such a football enthusiast. In fact, he had a very big background in football himself as a player, and I remember talking to him about that part of our shared experience just as much as gaming.
That's awesome. I didn't know that he was a huge football player. I didn't know that he was a fan, but
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he was an offensive lineman. I think he played guard or something like that before his legs got the better of him.
I have one more thing in common with Gary Gygax. I was a left guard in football. So
right. I played quarterback, so
nice, awesome.
So I'm very proud to have a friend that's on the offensive line.
Yeah, exactly. I protect you. You take me to the buffet.
I put the Rolex when I went into.
So you hit on an interesting point, by the way, that I think about from time to time. I sort of got into the hobby the same way, introduced sort of randomly one day by a friend, and then realized the best way to continue doing it was to just offer up to be the DM, right, consistently. And then I sort of got this weird sort of high off of educating people about the game that just were either curious about it or, I could never find a group and I've always wanted to play. And it just sort of became my sort of side quest, if you will, to get as many people into Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing gaming more generally that I could, because I think it's cool. And other people have sort of these preconceived notions and sort of nerves I found about it. And then when they sit down and do it, I find that most people like something about it, even if they are not going to be a consistent sort of player or fan beyond that.
I remember in the 70s, okay, for your listeners out here who are relatively new to the scene, the climate was very, very different in the 70s. Okay, we were in a world right then where you kind of had to hide the fact that you love Dungeons and Dragons. You kind of had to hide your nerd card a little bit because people would judge you and they had preconceived notions about who you were and what you were like. I mean, the satanic panic was a real thing back then. I mean, I remember the day that my stepmother, through my father, made my dad play a game with me as a spy to make sure I wasn't engaging in cult activity. Okay, I mean, these are the kind of things that we had to endure as young players. So I was kind of, my wife always likes to joke I was raised by wolves because I was a latchkey kid, and I kind of did a lot of stuff like that by myself. But even then, I kind of knew what Dungeons and Dragons was doing for me. I was learning so much about vocabulary, about the world, about language, about literary influences, about the crafting of a story, and a cogent plot line and things like that. You're learning these things latently, but you're learning them nonetheless. But I think I was aware of it. I think I was aware that I was transforming thanks to the game. And I thought to myself, as a guy, maybe I was naive back then, but I thought to myself, everybody needs to do this. Everybody needs to be playing this game because, man, it's doing so many great things for me personally. I feel like, I feel like I'm learning so much and it's so much fun. And I mean, who can't get down with a game where the limits are only your imagination? I mean, it's limitless. It really is true. Let's do this, man. So I just wanted to, like you, anybody who wanted to play, I was all about it. I was like, yeah, man, this game is the greatest thing ever. Please, give it a chance. Give it a chance. I know you're going to fall in love with it.
Absolutely. I mean, aside from just being able for me to not be bored of a very mechanically strict and non-imaginative gaming experience, right? Getting to create basically the platform and the foundation in which my players would be experiencing this for the first time. But more or less just seeing how people come together, especially over the last 10 years, I think, when we live in a culture now that is so defined by this constant pinging in your pocket, this instantaneous accessibility to the universe, on demand all the time, to put all that away in 2020 for me at this point and be able to recreate the same experience that players like yourself were creating decades ago until now. That, to me, there's something magical about that as well. You also touched on just the literary aspect of it. I recently ran T1 for for our group sort of offline a few months ago before Twitch sort of took all of our time. And I just find that
I feel you there, man.
I mean, yeah, before we started gaming for Twitch instead of gaming for ourselves like we used to. Also, we'll definitely talk a little bit later on in the show about pandemic gaming, because that's changed everything as well. But just reading through some of that early stuff, just literary beauty in the way that the verbiages and the vocabulary, like you'd said. I mean, Gary was a bit of a wordsmith. Frank Mentzer coming through and really tuning and polishing some of those more infamous modules as well. I mean, the stuff reads very well. You don't get a whole lot of that. I've actually found that about your content, and of course we want to talk about that today. But your content reads very well.
Thank you so much. Well, one thing I noticed about your background, I think a guest has a responsibility to do his homework as much as a host, is that you studied English, when you were in university, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, English literature.
I was a creative writing major at Bowling Green State University with a minor in lit with concentration in Russian poetry. So I find Gygax's words, I think his as a author, as a writer, his style is very Baroque. I mean, he has a very his style is very definitive, and it's very stilted in some places, but by the same token, it's his voice and it's very unique. And what I learned from Gygax is the art of of sentence structure. Gygax's sentence structure, it's very interesting if you really pay close attention to it from a stylistic standpoint. He does a lot of things turning sentences inside out, or he does a lot of things with subject predicate interchange and things like that are very unique to his own style, that I think I'm very sensitive to, having done so much style analysis through college. I really and that piece of my background was very helpful to me, because I mean, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and if you're going to imitate from somebody, why not do the best? So I try a little bit and put a little bit of Gary's voice into everything I do, while keeping it singular for myself. I always try and make that callback to remind my readers that, hey, this is you're reading first edition. You're reading a love letter to the game, to the Gygax family, to the man who was a father to me that never knew it. And into the world of Greyhawk and all of its fans. That's sort of why I keep that piece of sentence structure around.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with all of that more. There's an intrinsic literary quality as well as significant tone and voice there, and it's just a real joy to read back that. And so I certainly garner inspiration from it as I write our first few modules. So yeah, why don't we talk about Castle Entertainment a little bit further, right? Going from player to dungeon master to creator is an evolution that I've recently taken on myself. And I'd love to hear more about your journey, the ride you've had with your company thus far, sort of how it started and where we are today, right? Okay,
well, sure, absolutely. I'll take this back probably about 10 years. About 10 years ago, I was writing a play-by-post game. I had a lot of time on my hands, and I like to write, so I was doing that. And I've met my best friend in the world, Jeremy, through that. And Jeremy would tell me all the time, he goes, listen, you're wasting your time right now. You need to go pro. And I thought to myself, well, I really enjoy creating, but I'm pretty average, actually. I don't really think that anybody would really be interested in hearing what I have to say or reading any of my adventures. He's like, no, man, you really need to go pro. So about maybe 8 years later, I decided I was going to go to GaryCon for the first time. Mostly because one of my dear friends in the Greyhawk community, I knew Alan Grohe was going to be there. He encouraged me to go ahead and play in one of his games. So he ran Castle Greyhawk, and it'd been the first time I'd played in a game, I'd been a player in a long time. So it whetted my appetite a little bit more. I decided the next year I was going to run a game. So I wrote a module called Kill Marquesa. Now, Kill Marquesa is a callback to A2, which is Secret of the Slaver's Stockade, the old classic module, in which the villainous Marquesa is actually one of the main big bad guys. So I wrote that, and one thing that's about me is when I'm doing a project, I finish a part of it, and I think to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I added this? And that's how I ended up with using the Decker font, like the old the modules did in the old TSR days. And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if I? And that's how I ended up with a cover. Oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if I actually had it published? So I published it, just kind of give it away to whoever I thought was the MVP of the game. So I have this finished product in my hands. I'm there at GaryCon, and I don't even have a table arranged there. So I gangstered one of the the actual suites there, one of the office suites in there that's supposed to be for the VIP gamers. Please don't tell anybody I said that. But the next thing I knew, I had 14 people sitting around my table, one of whom was Luke Gygax.
Oh boy!
And
I was going to say don't tell Luke, but there he was.
Yeah, no, Luke knows. Luke's a good buddy now. But so I'm sitting there in this room looking around the table, and I'm like, well, I guess it's really on now. Because I'm looking around the table, half these people are people from the Greyhawk community that I know and respect, that are, to me, some of the guys like Mike Bridges, who I really, JC Luxton, who are really knowledgeable contributors to the setting that I think are just like, these guys are superheroes to me. So I'm running this game for them, and by the time I'm done with it, everyone's like, that was one of the most amazing games I've ever played in. And then they saw the published book, and they said, you're publishing now. I said, oh, no, this is just a mock-up. This is just you need to publish, man. Okay. Well, a year later, later in that show there, everyone was begging me to run a pickup game. And one of the players in my game had played a gnome character, and that was the first time I'd ever had a person volunteer to be a gnome. They said, you need to run an all-gnome game. Okay, fine. So I threw this pickup game together, and everybody loved it. They were like, Carlos, you absolutely need to publish. So the next year, that was when Casl Entertainment was born, at that with Kill Marquesa, which ended up being A5. To respect IP for Wizards of the Coast and TSR, because that's very important to me. So, I've changed names to protect the innocent. But I did make a callback to the Slavers modules. I titled this module A5.
That's great. Yeah, after In the Dungeons of the Slave Lords, yeah.
Right. So A4, A5, A6, A7 for me are my trilogy of Slavers modules. And I just released A8 to the public not long ago, which is called From Dark Roses, Black Thorns Grow. It's kind of my Marquesa series, the Slaver series, has kind of taken on a life of its own. It seems to do very well at conventions. Last year at GaryCon, or 2 years ago, I should say, at GaryCon, my game sold out in 3 minutes. I tend to sell out now in the first 10 minutes when my stuff goes live, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. I think it's important to stay to stay grounded. I never want to take my people for granted that enjoy my stuff. I don't think that's healthy. These are still my friends as well as my customers and my public. So I just I couldn't be more grateful for their support and for the fact that they make me feel like my voice is actually important and that the stuff I'm doing is worthwhile.
That's phenomenal. I think it's important to stay humble, to stay, of course, proud. And I can tell that you have a lot of pride in what you've done. But it is really a human experience. And this is all virtually meaningless unless we sort of reflect upon the people that dig our content. And we don't really learn anything as game authors until it is played out and people give us their feedback and we can see the smiles on faces. And
well, as I'm sitting right here doing this with you, I'm looking just to my right where I have a rack of Casl Entertainment modules. I'm looking at 15 different modules right now, the biggest of which is 88 pages, the smallest of which is probably about 32. And it's in its own way, it's humbling just looking at it and seeing how that this was possible because of those. They always say from tiny acorns, mighty oaks grow. And I'm looking at these and I think about that tiny acorn that was planted at that Gary Con when people were like, "You have to publish," and it's just been a humbling experience. It's been incredibly gratifying. I work extremely hard at it. I don't really take days off. I write a lot of times 8 hours a day in addition to my 40-hour a week job. So I do a lot of work for this, but by the same token, I'm driven. I'm driven by my love for the game. I'm driven by responsibility not to let the people down that have supported me this far and have helped me do what I love. I'm driven by the fact that I love the world of Greyhawk, which I want to get to very much later because I think it's a message I really want to give about Greyhawk. And I'm indebted to the Gygax family, to Luke and to Ernie and to Heidi and Elise and everybody in that family who is, I'm the brother that they never knew they had. Gary was my father in a very symbolic way. And if you ever follow my Facebook page, you'll see that my tagline is Mordenkainen's Last Apprentice.
That's awesome.
And I do that for a very real reason. I take that very seriously. That I really want to glorify what he did, and I always want to be able to think to myself. I'll never know, obviously, but I always want to think to myself that maybe, just maybe, he might have been proud of what I did.
That's excellent, and I think as sort of we over here at Minor Realm Games have been absorbing some of the content that you've put out, I can tell you at least that I think Gary would be extremely proud. I'm a huge fan of old school gaming. I play far more first edition AD&D now than I play fifth. That's just my preference. Just two different games, I think, in some ways. I mean, fundamentally, it's Dungeons and Dragons, but two different games for me. So, and I guess maybe let's talk about that a little bit, right? It's, a long time has passed. You have learned a lot. You've contributed 15 plus in growing in your catalog at casl. Why do you continue to write for sort of OSR or OSRIC compatible systems? Why haven't you expanded to 5e, just kind of considering the commercial success of the game? Is it sort of just a pure like fidelity thing of keeping it to the roots and what you fell in love with and what you've consistently played as a Greyhawk community member, or is there more there? Is it personal sort of affect or feeling around the other editions of the system? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. I want to be very clear about this too, because I think it's a great topic. I think that every single edition of Dungeons and Dragons is amazing. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. I want you to imagine if you were a golfer, okay? If you only had a driver in your bag, what happens when you get on the green? If you were a laborer, a tradesman, and you only had a screwdriver, are you going to use the back end of that to pound in a nail? Of course not. What Dungeons and Dragons has done is, with its different rule sets, every single one of them is a tool in a DM's toolbox. They all create fundamentally different experiences for the players, for the dungeon master, for everybody involved. If you want a specific experience, there is a game iteration just for you. They all do something different. They're all valid. They're all awesome. If you like the 5th edition and that caters to the way that you imagine the game, if it works for you, if it resonates with you, that's the best edition. Forget anything I say about first edition. That's the best edition. For me personally, and BX is the same way. And think about BX for a second, about how stripped down it is, how easy it is to create a character, how quickly you can get to the action. It's a very pure setting. Same thing with OE. If you're into more tactical gaming, 4E, for all how maligned it is, 4E is a very good system as far as tactical miniature gaming goes. Or you could even go back to chainmail for that. The truth is, it's a dirty secret because everybody likes to play the whole, superior game system thing. I don't do that. every single one of the iterations of Dungeons and Dragons is individually amazing. For me, 1E is the best system, and only for me, it's the best system because I am trying to recreate an experience in which that I enjoy. The kind of gaming that I grew up with, the kind of stories I want to tell, I can convey them best through 1E. That is the only reason I use 1E. However, Castle Entertainment in the future will be branching out to other systems in order to tell different kinds of stories that I also want to tell. But for the time being right now, 1E is where we're at because it does what we want it to do.
I think that's a great answer. I think about that in the same way. I've played a lot of 5E, right? Getting people into the game, to me, it was a lot more approachable, and it was just sort of great time and place and circumstance to use 5E as that vehicle, right? So, but it is a different sort of game. It's a different style, a different feel. That being said, I think some of the content that we're producing, or we intend to release here in the coming months, is I want to give sort of the dungeon master and the players the options to leverage what I like about all of those systems and those styles,
Sure.
where they might like, sort of pick and choose.
Sure.
We'll see if I crash and burn in that, Carlos.
No, I get the impression, I get the very distinct impression from reading the elevator pitch on Kickstarter and doing my due diligence on you guys' work that I'm pretty sure that you guys are going to bring the goods. I'm really excited to see your product.
Well, let's talk about your product. You just released C15 that's going to be Squaring the Circle. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about that? I think it just dropped this month, right?
Yeah, Squaring the Circle was play tested last month on Twitch. I did a 2-part live on that. You can catch it on YouTube if you go to the Castle Entertainment YouTube page. You can see the play test. It was the third and final episode in the 7 Gnomish Brothers series. Okay, remember when I said that I had somebody tell me that hey, you need to run something gnome only? Well, I ran something gnome only. I that year, Gary Con was dedicated to the memory of Don K. Okay, and I'm going to test you and your listeners' background in Dungeons and Dragons here. Don K was Gary's boon companion and one of his best friends in life. And Don was a huge enthusiast of Westerns. In particular, this is why his character was Merlin. And that's why Merlin, the deity in Greyhawk, wears a cowboy hat and has a star and uses 6-shooters, because he came from Earth to actually do that, had those backgrounds. Well, also, Don is the reason why Boot Hill came into existence. If you ever read the Dungeon Master's Guide, you'll see a little bit of conversion from Dungeons and Dragons to Boot Hill. That was just to cater to Don's love of Westerns. But anyway, I found out about that it was going to be dedicated to Don K, and I knew how important Don was to Gary. Therefore, he was that important to me as well. So I wanted to do something to laud his memory, and I'd gotten the whole, hey, Carlos, you need to do something with gnomes. So I created the first episode of the 7 Gnomish Brothers trilogy, which is called In Nomine Septem. It is my personal favorite Western, is The Magnificent Seven. So what I did was I created a version of The Magnificent Seven, which was all based around 7 gnomes. Well, anyone who knows anything about The Magnificent Seven knows that it is actually an homage in and of itself to the 7 Samurai. So I took a really deep dive into that because I really wanted to deal with some of the martial arts rules and things like that that had been released in throughout the first edition. And my 7 gnomish monks are all samurai. So you've got these samurai monks that are, they've got the Old West thing going on as well. So it's kind of like the 7 Samurai meets the Magnificent Seven meets the World of Greyhawk. And I released that in there, and it went off really, really well. People seem to love it. So the next year I came out with its sequel, which was Who Sits Upon the Oaken Throne. And I blame J.C. Luxton again for that, because J.C. was like, oh, next year you need to do something with political intrigue. Well, that's what happens. Well, that's what happens when the 7 gnomish monks find out what's going on and find out that it's actually has to do with the politics of the region. And they end up in this political kind of situation there with who sits upon the oaken throne. Well, finally just ended in Squaring the Circle, which is a kind of a little bit of my homage, a little bit to Gary's literary work with the world of Greyhawk in his Gord the Rogue series, because he uses a lot of Anthraxis the Oina Daemon as one of the main foils in there, and that ends up being one of the main cruxes of that plot. In particular, is Hades and the Oina Daemon and things like that, which I always used to love. So it was a chance to exercise that part of my imagination. So that was the newest module, Squaring the Circle. It's got, I think one of the main reasons why it's gained so much traction is because my good buddy Chet Minton, who's one of the Castle Entertainment's artists, did a magnificent, if you'll pardon the pun, cover for that module. That is, it's probably one of my favorites of our covers. I think it does such a good job of distilling all the things I like about the series into a single image. I love the image. So, and I think, people always say don't judge a book by its cover. Well, that's, people do. So
yeah, I'm judging hard in a good way, because it drew me in immediately as soon as I saw it release. So,
oh, thanks so much, man. Yeah, Chet just knocked that one out of the park. I mean, I've been very blessed. My former hobby before I got into going the pro route with Dungeons and Dragons was collecting original comic art. And I was fortunate enough because of that, I met a lot of artists, and I've been able to use those relationships to get people like Dan Govar, who does a lot of our other covers, to do some work for us. And that was a blessing for me. Is I didn't realize it, but I'd networked for the last 15 years before that through the comic art hobby.
That's phenomenal. Let's change gears a little bit. I brought this up earlier, and I really do want to hear sort of your opinion on it. I know you're on Twitch. You do a lot of the streaming games as is. How are you coping with this weird new, quote, normal that we're living in? How has this sort of changed your game, if at all? Are you getting burned out on virtual games yet? As somebody that enjoys to get around a table, I think, as much as me, if not more. How's that been working for you personally?
Well, in some ways, I think it's actually better, because what it's allowed people to do is it's legitimized and it's normalized online gaming, where before I think a lot of people were very leery of doing it. They didn't think the experience would translate. They were scared of it. It's going to take all this equipment. It's going to take this. It's going to take that. And people are starting to realize that, honestly, it's really not that difficult. And it's normalized the experience, which is a good thing. And here we are. If you would have told me as a 7-year-old kid back in Chicago, hey, little Carlos, one day you're going to be talking to a guy that lives across the country, and a guy who lives in another country, and a guy who lives across the Atlantic, and you're all going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons in real time, and it's not going to be on the phone. You're going to be able to see each other over like a TV screen. I would have told you that you'd watch too many episodes of the Jetsons. and here we are living it, and it's amazing. Now, there is no doubt also, though, however, at the same time, it changes you. For example, my style as a DM, I'm very kinetic. I'm very energetic. I like walking around the table when I'm DMing. One of my signature moments, probably, I was the guest of honor at GrogCon, and I want to take this moment to plug my two guys from GrogCon, James Garutsos and Dan Germansky, who run the show, and also Craig Russell, who hosts them through Crucible 8. Those guys are amazing, and you guys need to go to that show when we start doing conventions again. But I was a guest of honor at that show. One of my signature moments was I was playing a blue dragon, and I was walking around the table, kind of stalking everybody with these sibilant hisses in their corner of their ear when they would speak to each of the players, and I could see their reactions that nobody really had seen anybody do that really before, but everybody was really into it. Well, I can't get away with doing too much of that on Twitch. It's hard for me to reach through my screen and whisper a sibilant hiss into somebody's ear, and it's hard to really sometimes convey your energy through the screen. So you have to really you have to adapt a little bit. You have to emote more and in a different way, I think, as a DM, because telling a story is great. Okay, you can tell a great story as a DM. You can run a great combat, but what really makes things truly memorable is the energy that you give to your players and that feedback. You hear a lot about when you go to see a concert, and you're like the performers and the crowd. They form this connection. They form this. There's this energy, this feedback loop between the two of them. One gives them their energy, the other one passes it back, and it reaches this crescendo. If in really good performances where everyone's like, wow, that was legendary. Well, it's the same thing with Twitch gaming in a way. Well, DMing at all, really, in a way. But to form that connection through the screen, you have to really you have to change your style slightly to do so. I find so far that it's working pretty well. I've gotten some pretty good responses to people, from my players. If you guys want to check out some of our games, you can do so through our YouTube channel, like I said, or you can go through our Twitch, which is twitch.tv/casl entertainment, or just search us on YouTube, which is where all of our games are. And I think you'll see what I mean as far as energy goes. I kind of seem to have a reputation for doing combat and spells really well, which is weird to me because I never thought that was any particular special knack that I had, but people seem to really like those. So if you guys want to check that out, go ahead.
Yep, and I would encourage our listeners to do so. If you are trying to better understand, hey, how do I up my sort of DM ability, my game, or try to want to sort of better understand what Carlos is getting at, I think the stage presence, theatrics, the energy, the enthusiasm, they really go a long way in hiking up value in a gaming experience for players, and in this sort of universe where I never thought we'd be watching other people play Dungeons and Dragons on the internet, nor certainly me hosting it. It makes for just a better experience, more enjoyable experience, and optimizes it. Please check them out. Also, I believe, I don't want it to forget, I'd be remiss to not give you an opportunity. You have a Patreon that is doing well. You can always do better if you want to plug that.
Yeah, I would love to. My Patreon is through patreon.com/casl entertainment. I know that's a shocker, but my Patreon, I am really a believer in that times are tough right now for people around the country, and I try my best to give the absolute most bang for your buck that you could possibly receive through my Patreon. Depending on what level you're pledging at, you're going to get 3 character sheets with full art in them, a full character description. And again, this depends on the tier that you're at, but you can get a module every 2 months. You'll get a mini module from me every month, which generally ranges anywhere between 12 and 22 pages. You're going to get a magic item, a spell, and a monster of the month from me, all with art. You're going to get a full, usually an article and a letter from me every month. You can even be part of Casl Entertainment Games Online. Like I said, I really do my absolute best to make sure that you're getting the most for your money, because it's important to me that I'm not one of those kind of people, I guess, that likes to, I realize this is a business, but for me, it's also a labor of love. And I want everybody to be able to enjoy and feel like, hey, you know what, this is a positive thing, I'm backing this Patreon, and man, this guy is laying it all out on the table every month for me. So I want to make you guys proud. I want you guys to enjoy what, at least if you like my stuff, you're going to get a lot of it if you join the Patreon. So I think that that's probably the best I could possibly sell it to you guys out there, that you're going to get a lot of stuff from me.
That's awesome. Carlos, this was an absolute pleasure. I implore you, nay, I beg of you to leave me a seat open at GaryCon 2021, lucky number 13, as we're all sort of calling it. Yep. I know that you have a key spot in another virtual convention coming up. Before we go, a few words about Virtual Greyhawk Con.
Yeah, Virtual Greyhawk Con is the brainchild of Jay Scott. Some of you may be familiar with him on Twitch by the handle of Lord Gazumba. Jay is, like myself, a huge enthusiast of the world of Greyhawk. He's had a campaign that's been consistently running. I mean, when I say consistently running, I mean on a weekly basis for 40 years right now running. I mean, it's an amazing feat that him and his friends have managed to accomplish. So props to him for that. I mean, some of us are lucky if we can get that going for 4 sessions, let alone 40 years. But he has put together Virtual Greyhawk Con, which is going through tabletop events. They're still selling seats right now if you guys want to check it out. I am running a game called Reflections from a Smoking Mirror, which is set, obviously, in the world of Greyhawk. And I'm really, really excited about it. I finished the module. We just did character draft the other day on it. I've got 5 players that are all real expert players that are well-known in the world of Greyhawk fandom. One of them, in a weird kind of symmetry, I started this whole thing off with Alan Growe's game, and he's playing in my Virtual Greyhawk game. So I'm really gratified for that. I think the world of him. He's a great guy, and he's a monster creator in his own right. So it's going to be awesome. I'm really, really excited about running that game for everybody, and I hope you guys can see it on my Twitch.
Absolutely. Carlos, thank you so much for your time. To all of you out there listening, wards, wizards, archmages alike, please go check out Casl Entertainment. You'll find details on the YouTube version of this broadcast in the show notes. Otherwise, just a quick keyword search for Casl, CASL Entertainment should do it. Be sure to, if you are in a place to do so, to subscribe, if not purchase Carlos's work. And with that, I will deliver a final thank you for your subscriptions. Any follows, sort of clicking that button really helps us at this time, right? We look forward to, as we look ahead into the month of August, finishing out our Kickstarter for our first original module, Clock Strike Zero, as well as delivering a bunch of cool surprises coming up. Our D20 Connect event that we'll be running with other streamers across the world on October. I'm getting ahead of myself in this year. August 28th to 29th. Look out for more details coming soon. You can give us a follow on Twitter at Minor Realm Games for details. Until next time, happy gaming.